I'm Frank Andorka, Editorial Director of Solar Power World magazine, and I'm here with Rob Sternthal, President of Reznick Capital Group, and our finance columnist. He writes a monthly column for Solar Power World Online, and he appears in our magazine in the 6 issues a year that we do. We're very excited to have Rob as part of the Solar Power World team. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So, Rob, finance is a really hot issue in this industry. What I've discovered at this show is a lot of people are holding their breath because they're not sure what's going to happen both in November and the tariffs and all of that kind of stuff. I've heard a lot of people talk about the 1603 program and how that's dependent on what happens in November. What's your take? What have you been hearing at the show, and what is your sort of take on how people are feeling about finance here?
Okay, so my general take is probably, my takeaways are probably not as similar as yours. From my side, most people are more looking at projects and wondering if different ways of financing can make those projects viable. I think that seems to be the key focus. The other major takeaway from the conference that I'm getting is that people are focusing, there's starting to become a greater focus on solar DG away from utility scale solar because people aren't finding enough deals. Those are easy to finance. And when you move to solar DG, it's actually a tougher asset to finance. And so there's starting to be a lot more talk about that, more debt providers needed, more tax equity providers needed, more lower cost equity capital providers needed for that. So I think that would be the focus of what I've seen.
Were you able to get to Bill Clinton's speech yesterday?
I was not.
I was at it yesterday. One of the things he talked about was getting the solar message out to a broader audience. Do you have any thoughts about how you suggest we do that as an industry?
I mean, I think it depends on what you mean. I mean, I think the best way to direct that kind of message would be to make solar cost economic for everybody. So, for example, about 3 weeks ago, I bought solar for my house. I live in New York. Wasn't sure it was going to be economic, but as soon as it became economic, not only was it of interest to me because I'm in the field, but I live in a neighborhood of about 200 houses, and I sent an email to as many of those people in my neighborhood as I could, not just because of the referral fee, which I would give them, but mainly because once it's economic, people start getting the message and it starts becoming, it makes sense. If they know that on their own house, they know it's going to be good for their schools, their government, their, wherever they're working, all that sort of thing.
We've been talking for about the last 18 months about the tightness of credit and the difficulty of getting financing for solar projects, particularly the larger ones. I've also heard at this meeting that market may be freeing up a little bit or untightening. What is your sense of that?
I don't really work in the really large utility scale deals. That's really more of in my former life as an investment banker, but I do think that market is there. It's very viable. You look at the Mid-American transaction, you can issue debt in the public markets and it'll be oversubscribed 3 times. So to me, I don't know about the larger markets. In the smaller markets, we are seeing new entrants. The problem with the new entrants is they take time to get up and running, and their initial pools of capital are small. And so you have to be a very attractive developer or client to them, maybe more than for one reason. Maybe you're not just a solar developer, maybe you have other things going on that makes them want to work with you. So I think the market is continuing to open up as we go forward, and it'll open up more.
If you talk about distributed generation when you've got the smaller projects, how do you get financing for that? I keep hearing about bundling, and you bundle a bunch of projects together and sell those. Talk to me about how you get distributed generation projects funded.
So there's a few ways to do that. One way is to bundle, and bundling really means somewhere between 10 and 25 megawatts. Probably you're looking at $50 million and up. of a portfolio to interest tax equity and debt in those projects. Those projects have to cash flow, though. And a lot of times, even though you may bundle, you may not have a great amount of cash flow, so that means you have to do more. There's also another form of financing, which is sort of single investor or sale leasebacks, and there's a number of banks that do that on a small scale. For a developer who just wants to build and sell, that can be quite economic. But for a developer who wants to put in equity, hold, create an annuity, create a larger company that ultimately can be sold for its cash flows in the public, you really need to do a tax equity and a debt deal, and not just sort of a single one-off financing.
When you have the 1603 program expired, obviously, at the end of last year, some of the tax incentives are under attack and going away. When you're looking at the finance market and how those incentives have played into that market and really helped open it up, what do you think the long-term effect of having those subsidies or not having those subsidies will have on the market, on the financing part of it?
So costs have been driven down really, really low. Maybe because of the tariff, it's going to be tough to drive them down much further on the panel side. So I think having a credit or having a tax regime is really crucial, because on the other side of this, the PPA pricing and the revenues you're going to get from solar projects are also going down. Electricity prices don't seem to be going up enough to convince people that I should hedge my own electricity at 12 cents, at 15 cents, where solar is profitable now. So you continue to need a credit, a grant, or whatever it is. I would argue, however, that there will be a major change in the game between having a 1603 grant and an ITC. So in the 1603 grant world, anyone can build a project, get the money back, and own the project. In an ITC world, you have to either have tax capacity or you have to have the ability to sell that tax credit. It's not as easy to sell that tax credit as one would think normally. You have to have wherewithal, you have to have a balance sheet, and that's something we've been talking about in our articles, I think.
So you did a panel here at the show. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and what you guys were talking about?
So I submitted an abstract, and that gave me the ability to choose who I wanted to be on the panel. And what I liked about the panel was it was no service providers on the panel, except for me, I guess. It was really made up of sort of some of the who's who of project finance and CFOs of major solar developers. And that gave us the ability to really flesh out what they're seeing. You know, what is a CFO or a project finance guy at SunEdison or Martifer or Rick Moore at Washington Gas, how are they viewing this market? Because the way they view the market is so critical and so much more important. It's very important compared to all the smaller developers that are running around, because they have enough scale, enough size to think about creative solutions, because creative solutions are going to cost money initially and will drive down costs later. So I think that they had a lot of different ideas. We had a pretty healthy discussion along those lines, and hopefully, you know, something will come out. I mean, I always go back to I'm the cynic on the panel. I like to play devil's advocate. I don't like to buy into someone who thinks that securitization is just going to work or that private placements are for everybody. Without scale or without, you know, a big corporation behind you, it's very hard to do a lot of the things that these guys focus on, which is the opposite of the way the audience a lot of times thinks.
I'm Frank Andorka. I'm the editorial director of Solar Power World magazine, live from Solar Power International. We've been talking with Rob Sternthal, president of Reznick Capital Markets and one of our most popular columnists for Solar Power World Online, and he made his debut in the print magazine in our September issue. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Until next time.